Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So, it's been a couple of weeks. We had like a fall break randomly in the middle of the season. I don't think we had this long of a break at some point in the fall last year, but I think for us personally, it was a good month to have to ourselves. That's why we haven't posted. We've had a lot going on.
I also feel like it's been pretty quiet. Like, I feel like there's been...
It's been a quiet drama season, I feel like. I feel like last year everything was like, but also maybe it was all new and sparkly to us.
I feel like everyone's kind of like focused right now. Like, I feel like the race is so tight, that people are really... Yeah. I also feel like the drama that happens, and then, like, I mean, for us, like, we're still reeling from the Danny Rick announcement.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people are.
100%.
So, yeah.
Well, the Danny Rick announcement, we actually didn't get a chance to talk about that last time. There was the rumors that we spoke about, but that's part of what's happened over the last month. It was announced a couple days after the Singapore Grand Prix that Daniel Ricciardo would be not racing for V-Carb anymore, and he is being replaced by Liam Lawson. Very excited that Liam Lawson gets a seat. He definitely impressed everyone last year with his performance, but still obviously quite devastated for Danny. Definitely not the way that I think anyone wanted him to go out.
You know, there was another podcast that was talking about this a few weeks ago, and they kind of mentioned that, like, the timing could have been done better by the PR team at Red Bull to kind of give people breathing room to grieve a really well-liked driver.
Oh, 100%.
I also think, as someone who really was the face of Drive to Survive for quite a while, who was a fan favorite, I mean, listen, do I think at the end of the day, did he deserve a spot on the grid? I don't know. I don't know, but you can ask that question about so many of them right now.
100%.
And I think just the way it was done could have been done better.
Agreed.
I think it was expected, but I think it was just like this brushed under the rug moment that just felt a little icky for a team that kind of needs good PR at this point.
So. I do wonder if everybody on the grid knew, and that's why everyone was having like the goodbye stuff for him, and like him and Oscar switched helmets and stuff. Like, yeah, I just do wonder if they all knew about it.
I mean, I'm sure there were like massive grumblings going on in the paddock. I'm sure there was I'm sure there was a level of like contract clauses that Danny was aware of in like terms of performance, and so I'm sure multiple people knew.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But yeah, so kind of weird. And I feel for Liam Lawson too. Like, this is a really important moment in his career. I think this is one of those things that like could secure the V-Carb, will probably secure the V-Carb spot for next season.
Yeah.
But I think too, it's like, Red Bull, you're making people dislike someone because of the way you couldn't handle things.
Yeah, I think if they had had a proper goodbye for Danny and not the one that they did have, I think it would have been an easier entrance to the season for Liam.
Yeah, I mean, just like...
But also, I don't think people blame Liam, to be honest.
No, but I'm just saying, like, it felt like his announcement was so overshadowed.
Yeah.
It felt like his announcement wasn't the focus, so...
Yeah.
But, yeah, we'll see him in Texas.
Yeah. There's only really one other news thing there's like two things, kind of, to be honest. Okay. First thing, let me go over the news thing that I wrote about, and then second, let me go over the news thing that I didn't write down, because I will probably forget it if I don't talk about it now. So Otmar, I don't know how to say Otmar's last name, former Alpine team principal, he was on some podcasts over the last couple of weeks, and it's interesting some of the things that he said. So one of the things that he said was, it's not his fault that Oscar Piastri was not snatched up by Alpine. that it was kind of like Alpine executives who didn't want to actually exercise the clause to make him a driver. And then on top of that, when he worked for, I think it was when he was an Alpine team principal and somebody else, they didn't have enough money to pay the workers. And so he, out of his own pocket, ended up paying some people's salaries. And it was like millions of dollars that he ended up saying. And like none of these people knew about it. None of us knew about it until right now. And I think everyone kind of needs to give Otmar a little bit more credit. And I feel bad that he's kind of had a rough go in F1 sometimes.
I wonder if he's seeing kind of the media success that Gunther is having.
Maybe.
Now that he's departed, team principal status. And I wonder if that's kind of where he's inching towards. But I mean, I think it's interesting, or maybe his like NDA finally is up.
Probably. I mean, it's been over a year now, so yeah, his NDA is probably literally up.
But yeah, I think it's definitely a transparency, if it's true. I would hope it is.
I would imagine it is true, because why would he say it?
I feel like people would have already called it out.
That would be crazy for him to say that and it not be true.
But yeah, I think it definitely shines a light on like the financial struggles of these teams as well, and how bumbles and people can get fumbles can happen, and people can get blamed unnecessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, crazy. Those clips are circulating around like socials, I feel like.
Yeah.
I wish we knew the podcast that he was on.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is. I've just seen the clips.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about was, this was announced a couple of days ago. Haas is in a technical partnership with Toyota. So I have a few notes on it. Some of it I don't fully understand, but I'm just going to read it to you. Toyota Gazoo, Gazoo, sounds like Gazoo to me. Racing will provide design, technical, and manufacturing services to the Grand Prix squad. Toyota Gazoo drivers, engineers, and mechanics will be involved in Haas F1 tests, which helping them understand the challenges of modern Grand Prix machinery in a live environment. And then Toyota will also assist Haas with aerodynamic development, as well as helping design and manufacture carbon fiber parts to be used by the team. So, Toyota, I guess, is back in F1 a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do we know who their prior partner is?
No.
It's okay. I was just wondering.
Yeah, sorry.
But, yeah, I mean, very cool.
Okay, well, coming up is the United States Grand Prix, COTA, Austin, Texas. And we've got a normal get ready for the race episode. So, MC, who are you going over?
So, I wanted to go over another American, because, I mean, there is a handful, we're not lacking in numbers in like other countries. But we're going over Dan Gurney.
Never heard of the name, but excited to hear about him.
There's a crazy similarity between us and him.
Was he a rower?
No. It's even crazier.
Okay, well, I'm going to say what I have to say very fast so we can get to this, because I'm very interested. I will be talking about the 1984 Dallas Grand Prix, a one-year race in Dallas, Texas, which was a shit show, to be honest. These one-year races that they had in random cities, like the Vegas parking lot race and Dallas, Texas, and that one in Florida that was on some air park, it all seemed like a shit show. Yeah, that's what I'll be going over. And 1984 was all of like the famous people that you know all their names from. So I'll be going over that, and then we'll have our final thoughts. Very excited for F1 to be back. Very much need it to be back.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into Dan Gurney, because I would like to know what the similarity is. Okay, Mary Catherine, please tell me.
Okay, so it was like, I definitely would love to fact check this when we, I'll just tell you it, and then I'll tell you what I want to do.
Is he still alive? That's the question?
No. He passed away in 2018. So Daniel Sexton Gurney was born on April 13th, 1931 in Port Jefferson, New York. When he was a teenager who had just graduated Manhasset High School.
That's
His
our
family
hometown.
moved to Riverside, California. So I was just like, all of a sudden I was reading and I just picked him at
We have
random.
an F1 driver who graduated from our high school?
I want to fact check it. Like, I want boots on the ground next time, we're back in town in that neck of the, like, we don't live there anymore. So I'd love to go to, like, the library and see if they have all the old high school yearbooks. Or see if, like, the 1931 high school yearbook is somewhere.
How long was his
and
career?
Fact check. Like 11 years.
Okay, hold on a second. The only athlete that our high school ever talked about who had graduated from our high school was Jim Brown, the famous football player.
Mm-hmm.
Never in my life did I ever hear this name.
Yeah,
at
I
our
was
school.
shocked. Well, again, like, I got this from the internet, so I would love to, like, physically fact check
No,
it.
I trust everything on the internet because the internet is always right.
But I just thought it was so cool. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
never in my life had I heard of this, figure at our school, but
That's wild.
So, anyways, so he finished high school and his family moved to Riverside, California. According to a bunch of the articles, his family was a family of engineers, and I think a few were MIT grads, I believe. So this is kind of like the thing that alluded to him being interested in wanting to tinker with cars. The move to California and being a young man, he kind of got into the hot rod culture at this time. And he was super hooked. By 19, he had already built his own car and raced it on, like, the salt flats out in California. He would be an amateur racer, an amateur, like, there was another version of racing that they said, but he would just kind of do anything.
Cool.
But the Korean War rolled around, and so he served 2 years as an artillery mechanic, so, keeping in that mechanic field. After he did his 2 years, in 1957, Dan entered into the Riverside Grand Prix, and I tried to figure this out, and it seemed to be just like a showcase weekend where there was, like, conferences and races in between, and it was over a few days. And I think it only happened this one year. When he entered, he was given, like, a pretty crappy Ferrari that was known to be, like, difficult to handle, and other drivers that were, like, more well known had passed up driving it for, like, the better car. Apparently he was able to handle it very well, and this caught the attention of Ferrari importer Luigi Chinetti. And apparently Luigi Chinetti, I've never heard the name before. Apparently he was very famous. One article said famed, so
News to me.
gotta look into that. He was so impressed and had connections being, like, a very large Ferrari importer that he arranged for Dan to race in the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
Sick.
I'm not sure what he placed. I think it might have been 5th, but his performance caught the eye of, you bet it, some
Enzo
people's
Ferrari?
Lord and Savior, Enzo Ferrari. In 1959, he was entered into 4 races with Ferrari. Apparently, he was able to finish with 2 podiums out of the 4 races, but some articles alluded to the fact that he didn't mesh well with the strictness known at Ferrari.
Nobody did, apparently.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I just feel like a lot of people either enter with Ferrari or do, like, a season at Ferrari. Like, it seems like it's just a very different environment than other places. 1960 was not great for Dan. He transferred to BRM, or British Racing Motors, but had quite a lot of DNFs. The 1960 Dutch Grand Prix is an unfortunate point in his career. His car experienced a brake system failure that caused the car to crash, breaking Dan's arm, and unfortunately, it killed a young spectator. You have to remember this is 1960, so we've talked about it before. Safety
didn't
was
have any safety.
non-existent. So this is an unfortunate aspect of racing back then. And one article even kind of alluded to the fact that this caused Dan to kind of mistrust engineers for quite a while, and apparently he like changed his racing style because of this. Like it stuck with him so much.
It's interesting. I feel like a lot of the drivers who weren't like the crazy people back in the day, because they're the people who were like, I will die for this. The people who weren't like that back then, they had one bad crash and it understandably traumatized them for the rest of their career. That they like took certain precautions and did certain things because of the one bad crash that they had.
I also think that there is like a lot of different types of racers, and I think I'm learning that like my favorites are the ones that have big engineering backgrounds
Yeah.
that look at it as okay, these are the things I need to improve. I mean, like in today's day, they're the heavy petrol head guys.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think it's just really interesting to see the similarities between the more soft-spoken, humble guys who like are really doing it to improve the car to make a car that like they want to win.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like there's just like, and it's not saying that like guys that aren't like that view the sport. It's just it's the different type of like styles.
Yeah.
Um, so in 1961, Dan switched teams and started driving for the Porsche factory team. During this season, he was able to score 3 second place finishes, but was unable to achieve that maiden win. So at this point, like he hasn't won a single race. I mean, he's done like podium finishes, but hasn't won. Porsche's car improved in 1962, and he was able to achieve his maiden win at the French Grand Prix. This was also the only win for Porsche in the F1 field. Unfortunately, after 1962, they would pull out of F1. I think it dealt with funding, and Porsche has like I mean, there's a whole Porsche series.
Yeah.
They have like, they just, I think funds, it's expensive. In 1962, Jack Brabham saw a really amazing driver and an engineering mindset in Dan and really connected and asked him to join the team. In 1963, Jack and Dan brought Brabham to third in the Constructors' Championship. So at this point, the namesake is driving the car as well. Um, in 1964, this was the first win for Brabham's team by Dan at the French Grand Prix yet again. And then in 1965, this year was just a really reliable car for the team. So Dan was able to have a solid amount of podiums, and this allowed him to be fourth in the championship. In the early 1960s, Dan decided he wanted to start building American racing cars to compete in Europe as well as in America. One name that I think was suggested by like the Firestone or the Bridgestone, like one of the tire companies, was All American Racers. And the F1 side was named Anglo American Racers, probably because there was like a huge British effort in England as well as in America, I believe. And the name of the car was the American Grand Prix Eagle. The car was not ready for the 1966 Grand Prix, so they had to use an older car, and they eventually sort of found their footing. And then 1967 was a rough start as well when they weren't able to finish the first three races. Um, Dan was finally able to achieve a maiden win and the only win for the team in F1 during the 1967 Belgian Grand Prix, beating out the likes of Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart. He was also doing the 24 Hours of Le Mans around this time. And apparently he's credited for the infamous champagne spray we like all know today. Um, I don't know how that's like proven. I guess we would have to go back and like watch if they did it at that point, but apparently like he won or did really well at Le Mans and like sprayed champagne and it just continued from there.
Interesting.
Um it seemed like AAR kind of hit a peak at this point. Apparently, the car was pretty plagued by engine issues and would continue to cause problems. The team would wrap up racing in F1 at the Canadian Grand Prix, but they did continue to have teams in development in the States. His final year in the sport was the 1970 season where he was racing for McLaren. And then after 11 years, he decided he wanted to retire and focus on his company in the States. At 86 years old, Daniel Gurney passed away on January 14th, 2018. And just some notable things about him. There's a part on the car called a gurney flap. It's specific to the wing, and I'm pretty sure it's still used today.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we can attribute this to Dan and his engineering.
No way.
Um, yeah, many articles mention that Jim Clark once stated that Dan Gurney was the only driver he ever feared, which I thought was something really notable by someone who is just like an incredible driver himself. He achieved 87 race entries with 86 race starts. He won 4 Grand Prix and was on the podium 19 times. So, yeah, that's Dan Gurney from our hometown, essentially.
Did he end up having, like, I don't know if you read any personal information about him. Does he have any, like, living family now, or?
I believe so. I think he got married and then has children and grandchildren as well.
Okay,
But
interesting.
after high school, his family moved to California, and it looks like that's where, like, the company was based out of. Like,
Yeah.
his family is probably settled in California.
Yeah, none of them probably live in our hometown anymore.
Yeah.
Still interesting.
But yeah, I would love to just fact check with.
I know,
like,
in the break
local,
in between sessions, I think we should take a look.
Yeah, or like, email the principal and see if the high school library has.
Or have our mom go to the library and see.
Ooh, Mom would love that.
Oh yeah.
Mom, if you're listening, we'll probably call you later.
Yeah.
You'll give you a side quest for the pod.
Yeah, that would be preferred.
But yeah, so Dan Gurney, pretty cool.
Cool.
I feel like it's not a name we hear often, if at all. And with, an American Grand Prix, figured it was fun.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I am going to talk about the 1984 Dallas Grand Prix. So I'm going to get into that. In 1984, there was a US Grand Prix that was held in Dallas, Texas. This was then replaced eventually with, I believe, the Australian Grand Prix. And it's also the reason why we have COTA in October/November, because of how horrible this race was.
What time of year did they have it?
In the summer in Texas.
Oh, so like 115 degrees.
It was 100 degrees, and the track temperature was measured at 150 degrees.
Yeah.
So definitely not ideal racing conditions. Also, one thing to note, the track was falling apart. If you don't live in the United States, just some history on how some of the states work. Historically, a lot of the southern states have not had the most funding when it comes to like infrastructure, and so roads, like us living in Tennessee, our roads are horrendous. We have potholes everywhere and they're like falling apart. I've never been to Texas, but based on historical evidence, my guess is that's the reason why the roads were kind of crumbling for this.
So this was a street race?
It was on the fairgrounds of the Texas State Fairgrounds. So also just like not updated roads, because you're not like driving on them all the time, so they don't need to like keep them paved properly. And it was a tight and twisty course, which was laid out. But all the drivers, like layout wise, when I looked at the the track layout, it didn't look odd to me. But yeah. The garages were the Fair Park Coliseum, which was normally used for livestock shows. Bernie Ecclestone has a famous quote where he said, "We don't normally work in cow shit." Not surprised that Bernie Ecclestone said that. And like I said, the track was basically disintegrating. There was a lack of runoff areas and the surface was crumbling. It made the track seem more like a rallycross track than an actual Grand Prix circuit. And before qualifying, there's actually the track was literally bubbling underneath them because of how hot it was and how poorly made the track was. Yeah. Lotus drivers Mansell and DeAngelis started on the front row. Nelson Piquet wondered whether the drivers or the cars would be the first to break in the oppressive heat. And like I said, it was measured at 100 degrees outside, 150 degrees on the track. Hence why it was bubbling.
I would cry.
Yeah, not my thing. They were supposed to have a 30-minute warm up in the morning of the actual Grand Prix, which I guess was a thing back then. But it was canceled because of a 50-lap Can-Am race, which is just another different kind of series, on Saturday that had damaged the circuit so badly that emergency repairs wouldn't finish until about 30 minutes before the race. They were literally having to take like a jackhammer, like hammer up the road, and then use quick drying cement to try and actually pave the road. So that just shows how much of a shit show it was.
Oh my God.
Niki Lauda and Alain Prost tried to arrange a boycott amongst the drivers.
Love to see it, gentlemen.
Classic Lauda. But Rosberg, Nico Rosberg's dad, Kiki Rosberg, insisted they race.
Kiki.
Well, it turned out great for him, Kiki? Because he ended up winning. So, great day for him.
He had a plan.
Yeah, he knew that he was going to win that day, probably. So, Mansell led half of the race. Warwick, who was another driver, overtook DeAngelis, Mansell's teammate, his engine was suffering from a misfire. Warwick tried passing Mansell, but retired on lap 11 after a spin. Naturally. Arnoux, I don't know who he is, but he was a Ferrari driver, qualified fourth and had been unable to start his car on the grid. Began the race at the back of the pack, and then after the first lap had already passed 7 cars.
Wow.
Rosberg took the lead by forcing Mansell to make a mistake, and then Mansell's tires were like 30 laps into it, like absolutely trash. And at this point, they didn't have like a main tire provider. Like several teams had different tire providers. Piquet became the 9th car to retire because of the contact with the wall. There were, I think, a total of 11 cars to retire in this race. Prost took the lead from Rosberg on lap 49 and opened up a 7.5 second lead, but then 8 laps later struck a wall and damaged a wheel rim. So he was basically just like, he was essentially out. Rosberg inherited a 10-second lead over Arnoux, and then he ended up winning this race. He scored his only victory of the year for Williams as they reached the 2-hour limit of the race. So if you don't know, there's a 2-hour limit of the race. So even if they don't finish all of the laps, it's done. They were actually 1 lap short of finishing the race. Wow. So it's supposed to be like 69 laps and they were at 68. So they kind of got close. Mansell tried pushing his Lotus to the finish line, but he actually ended up passing out before he got there.
I shouldn't laugh at that.
Because of how hot it was and how hot the engine was and how overexerted he was, he literally passed out on the track trying to push it over the finish line. Which, I'm sorry.
Dedication.
There are so many times that drivers have done this, pushed their car to the finish line. I just want it to happen one of these days.
It's just, like, it seems to be a theme recently.
Of like the historical races.
I don't know if they're allowed to because they're not allowed to get out of the car.
Oh, that's correct. They're not allowed to do that anymore.
They're not allowed to do it anymore.
Damn, that would have been really entertaining. I want to see Charles Leclerc push his car to the end.
Someone fact check us. You guys always do.
I mean, they quite literally get fined if they walk across the track after they...
So I don't think they would... They would raise up, like, red flags so fast.
Ugh. I mean, it's probably for safety. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean...
And then, so one of the cars that retired was Senna. He retired on lap 47, and he was convinced a wall had moved, and that's why he had hit it. And he was like, I don't understand. I did the same thing that I did on the last lap. How did I crash into that? And everyone was like, no, Senna, that didn't happen. Like, that's not possible. Everyone was gaslighting him, and he was right. The wall moved, okay? So in a crash in an earlier part of the race, it literally caused the wall to move, and it wasn't fixed before the race restarted. And so Senna was just taking the lap like he had before, and because the wall had moved, it threw him off, and he ended up crashing and had to retire the race, and everybody was just gaslighting him, but he was correct. The wall had moved.
Wow.
So the results of the race was Keke Rosberg in first with Williams. Second was Rene Arnoux with Ferrari, and third was Elio De Angelis with Lotus Renault. I just thought it was an interesting race because of all of the heat aspects of it. We do have a bunch of the hot races coming up, like
Very
Qatar.
Hot races. Texas, I mean,
right now it's pretty toasty still in the United States.
It's pretty hot still.
It was 85 degrees today in Tennessee.
I don't know how Mexico City is gonna be. I feel like, well, Brazil's cold. When we talk to the Brazil team, they're like, because they're Southern Hemisphere, so.
Yeah, I do feel like once it hits Halloween, things start to get colder for some reason.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see.
Well, I gotta double check the dates, but like the season goes late this year.
Yeah, the last race is like December 8th, I think it is.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was the 1984 Dallas, Texas Grand Prix. Interesting one for sure.
Yeah.
And I love hearing that Bernie Ecclestone quote because I've heard it before. I just didn't know where it was from.
I feel like we had some pretty interesting topics this week.
Definitely. Okay, we're going to get into our final thoughts now. We talked a lot about the news at the very beginning, so there's not really much to go over right now, to be honest. I do know there's going to be a lot of people like actually at the race this upcoming weekend. Like, this is the one that a lot of the content creators go to.
A lot of celebrities are at.
Yeah, that a lot of the teams have like different events at as well. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo's Enchantés are still having a pop-up there, which is crazy.
Did you see that? I don't know if this was true. Apparently he was supposed to be getting keys to the city.
Oh, that's so awkward. Yeah, he did have a special helmet design for this race, and people were like, we really hope that Max pulls up with that special helmet design.
Yeah.
That would be really sweet.
We have a little tribute this week. You'll see it in a few days.
Yeah, on our Instagram, a little Danny Rick tribute.
Yeah, give it some love.
Yeah, we're acting like he died.
Yeah. Rip. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad we had this break. I feel like we kind of needed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're back. Starts Thursday.
In the next upcoming weeks, we're going to have a few pre-recorded episodes, sort of ish. So there might be some parts that we're wearing one outfit in one episode and then another for like the final thoughts or like the intros. Just ignore that because we're trying to make sure we can get episodes out to you while also still having lives. So yeah.
We're also like still thick and like running around. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But the race is on Central Time this week, so it's I believe the race is at like 4 p.m. or something, or 3 p.m. or something on Sunday. Can't remember off the top of my head, but make sure to keep an eye out for the schedule. We'll be posting that sometime soon. And it's great to be back.
Yeah.
Glad we're back. Honestly, so happy. I need the relief and freedom and excitement of F1 again, honestly.
Freedom of F1.
I feel, yeah, it frees me from my head.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay. Well, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment, share.
Ring bells.
All the things.
All the things.
Alrighty. Bye, guys.
Bye.